There's a piece of land in Colorado Springs where my mother used to grow tomatoes. She died there. Not in the garden, in the hospice bed my father set up in the living room so he wouldn't have to drive to the hospital. While she was dying, he was moving her land into his company. While I was holding her hand, he was holding a pen. I found out 5 years later when he walked into my dental clinic and asked me to give it back. Give back what was never his. My new story is ready. Welcome. There's a manila envelope sitting on my desk right now, wedged between a stack of insurance claims and a crayon drawing of a purple dinosaur that a 7-year-old patient made me last Tuesday. The envelope has a coffee ring on it. Not mine, his. And a crease down the middle where he folded it to fit inside his jacket pocket, which tells you something about a man who walks into a pediatric dental clinic to deliver legal documents. He couldn't even be bothered to bring a briefcase. The paper itself is standard, 2 pages, legal formatting, but what's written on it is worth exactly $780,000, and the man who left it here wanted me to sign it for free. I'll get to that. My name is Sloan Beckett. I'm 34 years old. I'm a pediatric dentist in Denver, Colorado, which means I spend my days convincing small humans that the buzzy thing won't hurt and that the treasure chest at the end is worth the 10 minutes of mild discomfort. I own Rocky Mountain Pediatric Dentistry on South Federal Boulevard, 4 operatories. A waiting room with chairs shaped like dinosaurs because an article I read said themed environments reduce pediatric anxiety by 37%. I don't know if that statistic is real, but the kids love the Triceratops, so the point is moot. I accept Medicaid. I don't turn anyone away for not having insurance. I have a fish tank in the lobby that cost me $800 because another article said aquariums lower cortisol levels in clinical settings. I'm starting to think I should stop reading articles. 5 years ago, my father told me I was on my own. Those were his exact words. Not goodbye, not I'm disappointed, not let's talk about this. Just, you're on your own. He said it standing at the bottom of the staircase in the house I grew up in, the house my mother died in, the house that still smelled like her lavender hand cream in the hallway closet, even though she'd been gone for 2 years by then. I'd refused to sell her land. That's what started it. My mother, Catherine Beckett, left a piece of property in Colorado Springs. 1.2 acres on the south side, where the city starts thinning out and the lots get wider, and the soil is the kind of red-brown clay that she somehow coaxed tomatoes out of every summer. She grew brandywines and Cherokee purples and those little sun-gold cherry tomatoes that taste like candy if you eat them warm off the vine. I know this because I spent every summer of my childhood with dirt under my fingernails, kneeling beside her, learning that you plant basil next to tomatoes because it keeps the aphids away. She died on May 1st, 2017, pancreatic cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it, which is how pancreatic cancer works. It hides, it waits, then it takes everything in about 4 months. She was 57. I was 27. I held her hand in that living room hospice bed and read to her from a paperback she'd been halfway through when the diagnosis came. She never finished it. I did, months later, alone in my apartment, and the ending wasn't very good, which felt like the kind of cosmic joke she would have laughed at. My father, Martin Beckett, wanted her land for a development project, mixed-use commercial, he said, partnership with a group out of Denver, good money, smart investment. He said this at the kitchen table 3 weeks after the funeral, while I was still finding her grocery lists in jacket pockets and her reading glasses in the bathroom drawer. I told him no, the land was hers. It was the last thing that was hers. And I wasn't selling it so he could pour concrete over the spot where she grew tomatoes. He told me I was on my own. My brother Donovan, 5 years younger than me, 22 at the time, stood on the stairs and said nothing, not one word. He looked at me the way people look at car accidents, interested but not enough to stop. I haven't spoken to my father in 5 years. 5 years, 2 months, and I'm not going to count the days because that would suggest I've been tracking. I haven't. I've been busy building a dental practice from a 2-chair setup in a rented suite that smelled like the dog groomer next door into a 4-operatory clinic with dinosaur chairs and a fish tank and 403 5-star reviews on Google. I didn't have time to track anything except accounts receivable and whether my Subaru needed an oil change. But 3 days ago, Martin Beckett walked back into my life, and he brought a manila envelope that smelled like his cologne and contained a document that would unravel everything I thought I knew about the last 5 years. $780,000. My mother's land, a company I'd never heard of, and a signature line with my name already printed on it, waiting for me to give away everything she left behind. I'll tell you what happened, but I need you to understand something first. I'm a dentist. I don't do gut feelings. I don't do hunches or bad vibes or something just felt off. I look at x-rays. I measure pocket depths. I make decisions based on what I can see, count, and document. If the numbers say you need a root canal, you need a root canal. Your feelings about it are not clinically relevant. So when I tell you that the numbers on that document didn't add up, I mean it literally. And when I tell you that what I found underneath those numbers changed everything, I mean that literally, too. 3 days before the coffee ring, it was a Wednesday, 10:12 in the morning. I had Amara in chair 3, the one shaped like a stegosaurus, which is her favorite because she says stegosauruses are the nicest dinosaurs. She's 7. Her mother, Renata, works 2 jobs: housekeeping at a hotel on Colorado Boulevard in the mornings, shelf stocking at a grocery store on Alameda 4 nights a week. Amara needs braces. Renata is paying for them in installments so small they barely register on my accounts receivable, but they register on hers. I know this because Renata once told me she skipped lunch for a week to make the February payment on time. She told me this while smiling like it was a funny story. It wasn't a funny story. I was adjusting Amara's spacer and telling her about how stegosauruses had brains the size of walnuts, which is my go-to distraction fact for spacer adjustments, when my front desk coordinator, a woman named Grace who has worked with me since the dog groomer smell days, appeared in the operatory doorway. She had a look on her face. If you've ever worked in a dental office, you know the look. It's the one that says something is happening in the lobby that isn't on the schedule. It could be a walk-in with a toothache. It could be a vendor who won't leave. Or it could be a man who says he's your father and hasn't said anything to you in 5 years. "There's a man in the lobby who says he's your father," Grace said. She said it the way you'd say, "There's a wasp in the break room." Calm, informative, but with a clear subtext of, "Please deal with this before someone gets stung." I set the scaler down, told Amara I'd be right back and that the stegosaurus would keep her company. She gave me a thumbs up with the hand that wasn't gripping the armrest. I peeled off my gloves, dropped them in the bin, and walked toward the lobby. I want you to understand something about my clinic before I describe what happened next. Rocky Mountain Pediatric Dentistry is designed for children, every square inch of it. The walls are painted with murals of underwater scenes and jungle canopies. The chairs in the waiting room are shaped like dinosaurs. There's a treasure chest by the front desk filled with stickers and plastic rings and those tiny rubber bouncy balls that inevitably end up under the refrigerator in someone's kitchen. The lighting is warm. The music is soft. It smells like vanilla because I put a diffuser near the intake vent after reading that vanilla reduces anxiety in clinical settings. Into this space walked Martin Beckett, 63 years old, 6'1", same tucked-in polo shirt he wore the last time I saw him. Not the same one, obviously, but the same brand, same shade of forest green, same way he tucked it into khakis that were creased so sharp you could file paperwork with them. 5 years of silence, and the man shows up in the same outfit. Like he'd been vacuum sealed in 2019, and someone cracked the package open that morning specifically to ruin my Wednesday. He didn't say hello. Didn't say you look good or nice place or sorry I haven't acknowledged your existence in half a decade. He walked past Grace, past the fish tank, past a 4-year-old in the waiting room who was mid-meltdown about a loose tooth, and straight into my private office like he still had a key to every room I'd ever occupied. I followed him. Not because I wanted to, but because a 63-year-old man walking through a pediatric dental clinic like he owns the place is the kind of thing you need to manage before the parents in the waiting room start asking questions. He was standing behind my desk, in my office, looking at the wall where I have my dental school diploma, my Colorado state license, and the crayon drawing Amara made me 3 weeks ago of a purple T-Rex wearing a doctor's coat. He was looking at that drawing the way you'd look at a stain on a restaurant tablecloth. Mild disgust, vague confusion. He put a manila envelope on my desk, didn't hand it to me, put it down, firmly, the way you put down a card's hand you think is a winner. "Don't make this complicated, Sloan," he said. "Sign the transfer. You have 48 hours. Then he turned and walked out, past my diplomas, past Amara's drawing, Past the treasure chest and the fish tank and the 4-year-old who had now moved on from the meltdown and was watching a cartoon on his mother's phone. The bell above the door chimed. The fish tank bubbled. Grace peered around the corner and whispered, "That went well." I sat down at my desk, picked up the envelope, opened it. 2 pages. Standard legal formatting. Voluntary transfer of membership interest, Beckett Development Partners, LLC. My full legal name, Sloane Catherine Beckett, printed on page 2 as a 15% member. I'd never heard of Beckett Development Partners, LLC. I didn't know what a membership interest was. I didn't know what 15% referred to. And I absolutely did not know why my father, who had told me I was on my own 5 years ago, and then apparently meant it with his entire chest, had just walked into my children's dental clinic and demanded I sign something. But I didn't say any of that. The thing about dealing with someone like Martin Beckett is that you never show confusion. Confusion is a door he walks right through. You stand there, you nod like you're reviewing a treatment plan, and you say the thing that buys you time without giving him anything to grab onto. I told the empty room I'd have my attorney review them. Then I went back to chair 3, put on fresh gloves, and finished Amara's spacer adjustment. She picked a T-Rex sticker from the treasure chest on her way out. She always picks the T-Rex. Consistent kid. I respect that. It wasn't until Grace locked the front door at 6:15 that evening and the clinic went quiet that I sat back down with those 2 pages and read them again. Voluntary transfer, 15% membership interest. Beckett Development Partners, LLC. And a 48-hour deadline from a man who looked like he hadn't slept properly in a week, which I'd noticed but filed away at the time because noticing things and reacting to them are 2 very different skills. 15% of what? And why did a man who erased me for 5 years look like the deadline was his, not mine? I have a friend named Theo Nakamura who I run with every Sunday morning in Washington Park. And when I say run with, I mean he shows up in compression socks and a headband that makes him look like a 1980s aerobics instructor, and then proceeds to be the slowest human in our group by a margin so wide that we once finished a 5K loop and found him still on mile 2, crouched over, hands on knees, having what he described as a spiritual experience with his own cardiovascular system. But the man can read a balance sheet. He's a CPA at a small firm off Colfax Avenue, specializes in small business taxes and LLC filings, and once found a $9,000 discrepancy in my quarterly tax return that my previous accountant had missed for 2 years. He does his best analytical work on napkins, which I've learned to accept as a personality trait rather than a professional red flag. He bats about .220 in the office softball league and has a framed photo of his cat, Debit, on his desk next to his master's degree in accounting. The cat is in the bigger frame. I brought him the papers that Thursday. We sat at a corner table in a coffee shop on South Broadway, the kind with exposed brick and pour-over coffee that takes 11 minutes and costs $6, and I slid the 2-page document across the table like it was a medical test result I wasn't ready to read myself. Theo spread the operating agreement across the table, moving the sugar dispenser and the little ceramic vase with the dried flour in it like he was processing a crime scene, which, looking back, he kind of was. He read it twice. Then he pulled a napkin from the dispenser, uncapped his pen, and started writing. Theo's napkin notes are more organized than most people's spreadsheets. The man structures his thoughts on paper products the way architects draft blueprints. "First thing," he said, "this is real. The membership is active. It's on file with the Colorado Secretary of State. You are a 15% member of Beckett Development Partners, LLC. I asked him when it was created. He flipped back to the first page. 2017, he said. Filed in July. He looked up at me. When did your mother pass? May, I said. May 1st. He didn't say anything for a moment, just wrote something on the napkin. I couldn't read it upside down, but I saw him underline it twice. The operating agreement was filed 2 months after your mother's funeral, he said. You were 27. I was 27. I was also barely sleeping, still finding my mother's grocery lists in coat pockets and trying to figure out how to apply to dental school while working full-time as a hygienist in someone else's practice. I was not, at any point during that summer, reviewing LLC operating agreements or consenting to membership in a real estate holding company. But my name was on it. Sloane Catherine Beckett, 15% member. Theo walked me through the key provisions. Standard Family LLC structure, he said. Distribution of income, management rights, capital contributions. Martin held 60%. Someone else held 25%, listed only as D. Beckett, which I assumed was Donovan, and I held 15. But one clause made Theo tap his pen on the napkin 3 times. In Theo language, 3 taps means pay attention, 2 taps means interesting, 1 tap means I need more coffee. 3 taps means this is the thing. Article 9.2, he said. Unanimous consent required. Any sale, transfer, encumbrance, or disposition of LLC-owned property requires the written consent of all members. All 3. Martin, D, Beckett, and you. He looked at me over his pour-over. Your dad can't sell a parking spot without your signature, Sloan. I let that settle. The coffee shop was playing something acoustic and vaguely melancholy, which felt appropriate. A woman at the next table was video calling someone and laughing about a dog that had eaten a shoe. Normal life happening 6 feet from the table, where I was learning that my estranged father had put my name on a real estate company without my knowledge and now needed my permission to do anything with it. But Theo wasn't done. He flipped to page 2, section 11, and tapped again. 3 taps. Article 11.4, he said. Any member may request an independent appraisal of LLC assets prior to consenting to any proposed transaction. The appraisal process requires a minimum of 60 calendar days from the date of the formal request. He set the pen down. So let me make sure you understand this, he said. Your father needs your signature to sell anything. And if you don't want to sign, you can request an appraisal that freezes everything for 2 months. He wrote both of these clauses himself. They're in his own operating agreement. Theo picked up his pour-over coffee, took a sip, set it down. He built the lock and gave you the key, he said. He just didn't think you'd ever use it. I sat there for a long time. The acoustic song ended. Another one started. The woman at the next table hung up her video call. The barista called out an order for someone named Kyle. Normal life continued to happen around a table covered in napkins and legal documents and a $6 coffee I hadn't touched. I asked Theo the question that would keep me awake for the next 2 weeks. Why now? If this LLC has existed since 2017, if my name has been on it for 7 years, why does he need my signature right now? What's happening that can't wait? Theo shrugged. That's not an accounting question, he said. That's a dad question. It was a dad question. And I was going to find the answer, even if it meant doing something I hadn't done in 7 years, which was engage with the Beckett family ecosystem, a system designed by Martin to function with everyone in their assigned roles, doing what they were told, asking nothing. I'd been unassigned for 5 years, and apparently that was a problem. That night, my phone buzzed at 9:47, a number I hadn't seen since the last time anyone thought streaming services would max out at 3. Donovan. My little brother. 2 sentences. No greeting. No hey sis, long time no talk. No, sorry about the half-decade of radio silence. Just instructions. Sign the papers. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Like a forwarded memo from middle management. Please complete the requested action. Do not reply to this message. I stared at those 2 sentences for a long time. Then I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter and went to bed. Not because I was tired, but because responding to Donovan at 9:47 on a Thursday night, while I was still processing the phrase 60-day appraisal freeze, was the kind of decision that leads to texts you screenshot and regret. And I don't send texts I regret. I send X-rays I regret. Very different category. I looked at Donovan's text again the next morning. 7:22, standing in my kitchen, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, toothpaste still on the corner of my mouth because I'd heard the buzz while brushing, and apparently my brother's first communication in 5 years took priority over oral hygiene, which, as a dentist, I find personally offensive. Sign the papers. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. 12 words, no greeting, no question mark. No acknowledgement that the last time he'd spoken to me, I was loading boxes into my Subaru in the driveway of the house our mother died in while our father watched from the porch with his arms crossed like a bouncer at a club I was no longer welcome in. Donovan had been standing on the stairs that day too, inside the house, visible through the screen door. 22 years old, still living at home, still working part-time for Martin's property management company, still wearing the expression of a man who'd chosen a side by choosing no side at all. He didn't help me carry boxes. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't even close the screen door when he went back inside, which meant I heard it banging in the wind as I pulled out of the driveway, and that sound, that lazy slap of aluminum on wood frame, became the sound of my brother in my memory, not his voice. Not a word, he said, just a door he couldn't be bothered to close. I want to be careful here because I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking Donovan was a kid, 22, still under Martin's roof, still financially dependent, still learning how to be a person. And you'd be right about all of that. But 22 is old enough to close a door. 22 is old enough to text your sister in the weeks that follow and say, "I'm sorry," or "Are you okay?" or even just, "Hey." 22 is old enough to choose, and choosing silence is still a choice. It's just the one that costs you the least at the time. 5 years later, his first words to me were, "Sign the papers." Not "Are you alive?" Not "I've thought about you." Not even "Happy birthday," which he'd missed 5 of. Just instructions, delivered with all the warmth of a parking citation. I didn't reply. I rinsed the toothpaste off my face, finished my coffee, and drove to work. The clinic was busy that Friday. 3 sealant appointments back to back, a consultation for a nervous 5-year-old whose mother had already apologized 4 times in the waiting room for her son's behavior, which I told her was entirely unnecessary because nervous 5-year-olds are literally my job description. Grace was managing the front desk with the quiet efficiency of someone who has seen every possible thing walk through a pediatric dental office door and has decided that none of it will surprise her anymore. Amara's mother, Renata, called to confirm next month's appointment. She asked Grace if there were any openings on a Tuesday because she'd picked up extra shifts, and Tuesdays were her only day off now. Grace found one. I overheard the call from the operatory and thought about Renata skipping lunch to make the February payment and picking up extra shifts so she could make the next one. I thought about the word sacrifice and how it's used so casually in this country by people who have never had to choose between feeding themselves and straightening their daughter's teeth. Around 1:30, my hygienist took her lunch break and I covered the front desk for 20 minutes. Answered phones, confirmed 2 appointments, ran an insurance verification, and smiled at a mother who was checking in while carrying a toddler on one hip and a diaper bag the size of a small country on the other. Normal Friday. Phones ringing. Kids laughing in the waiting room, the fish tank bubbling its $800 bubbles. And in the back of my head, Theo's voice on a loop. He built the lock and gave you the key. Why now? Priya found me in the break room at 4:45. Priya is my associate dentist, 28 years old, graduated from the University of Colorado School of Dental Medicine 2 years ago. $400,000 in student loans, which is a number that makes my eyes water every time I think about it, and I went to dental school myself. She's brilliant, methodical, has a way with kids that you can't teach because it comes from somewhere real, somewhere that has nothing to do with training and everything to do with actually liking small humans, which not every pediatric dentist does, despite what their websites say. She sat down across from me with a cup of tea that smelled like chamomile and something I couldn't identify. Turmeric, maybe. Priya drinks tea the way other people drink wine, ceremonially. She told me she'd gotten an offer. Corporate dental chain. One of the big ones with locations in strip malls across 14 states and a logo that looks like a tooth wearing sunglasses, which should tell you everything you need to know about their clinical philosophy. They were offering her 30% more than I was paying her. Benefits package, signing bonus, structured schedule, no weekends, no Medicaid patients, no insurance headaches. She told me this while looking at the table, not at me. And then she looked up and said the thing that rearranged something inside my chest. "I don't want to take it," she said. "I know the money is better. I know the loans are." She paused. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. $400,000 finishes its own sentences. "But I came here because you take Medicaid," she said. "Because you don't turn people away. Because Amara's mom can pay in installments, and you don't send her to collections. I didn't go to dental school to fill cavities in a strip mall for a company that treats patients like line items. I went to dental school because of clinics like this one." She picked up her tea, took a sip, set it down. "I just need to know the clinic is going to be okay," she said, "because I can't afford to bet on something that isn't." I told her the clinic was fine. I said it with the confidence of a woman whose estranged father had just walked in 3 days ago, demanding she sign away 15% of a company she'd never heard of, whose brother had texted her instructions like a parking meter, and whose desk currently had a manila envelope on it that she was afraid to look at again. Fine. Totally fine. The clinic was a fortress of stability, and I was its unshakable captain. Priya nodded. She believed me. Or she chose to, which is sometimes the same thing. After she left the break room, I sat there with my cold coffee and thought about what she'd said. She believed in what we were building, not just a dental practice. A place where Renata could pay in installments and Amara could pick a T-Rex sticker and a nervous 5-year-old could learn that the dentist's office doesn't have to be scary. Priya believed in that. She was betting $400,000 in student loans on it. And what we were building was sitting on ground I didn't own, inside a company I didn't understand, controlled by a man who'd told me I was on my own, and then apparently kept my name on his paperwork anyway. I needed to see the numbers. All of them. Theo filed the K-1 request the following Monday. As a listed member of Beckett Development Partners LLC, whether I'd actually signed the operating agreement or not, I was legally entitled to the tax filings. He submitted the request through proper channels. Clean, documented, the kind of paper trail that Theo builds the way other people build model trains. With precision and a level of enthusiasm that probably concerns his therapist, the filings came back in 4 business days. He called me at the clinic on a Thursday afternoon, right between a sealant and a consultation, and said 3 words that made me close my office door and sit down. "You need to see this." I met him at his office after the clinic closed. Small firm off Colfax, 2nd floor, the kind of building where the elevator makes a sound that suggests it's negotiating with gravity rather than cooperating with it. Theo's office had 3 things on the wall: his master's degree, his CPA license, and a framed photo of Debit, his orange tabby, sitting in a cardboard box with an expression of philosophical detachment. The cat photo was the largest of the 3. I've mentioned this before. It bears repeating. He had the K-1 filings spread across his desk, 9 pages, 1 for each property held by Beckett Development Partners LLC. 9 properties, he said, commercial and residential, Denver Metro, Colorado Springs, Lakewood. Your father's been busy. He turned his monitor toward me and walked me through the list. 2 strip malls in Lakewood, 3 office suites in the Denver Tech Center, 2 mixed-use buildings on South Broadway, 1 in the Highlands, and 1 standalone commercial unit on South Federal Boulevard. I'd come back to that one, but not yet. And then there was row 9, a piece of land, 1.2 acres, south side of Colorado Springs. Theo had organized everything into a spreadsheet, because of course he had. Columns for address, assessed value, square footage, tenant status, and any recorded liens or encumbrances. All public information. County assessor records. El Paso County and Ada County and Jefferson County. Basic stuff that anyone with an internet connection and enough patience could pull together. The total appraised value, based on the most recent county assessor records across all 9 properties, was approximately $5,200,000. Theo did the math on a napkin, literally a napkin. He'd grabbed one from the coffee shop downstairs and had it ready on his desk like a surgical instrument. The man has a master's degree in accounting and a perfectly functional calculator on his computer, and he does his best work on a paper napkin from a cafe that sells $3 drip coffee and day-old scones. 15% of $5.2 million, he said, writing the numbers in handwriting so neat it looked typed. $780,000. He circled the number. Then he underlined it. Then he drew an arrow pointing to it, which was redundant given the circle and the underline, but Theo believes in emphasis the way some people believe in exercise. More is always better. $780,000. My father had walked into my pediatric dental clinic, past the dinosaur chairs and the treasure chest, and a 7-year-old getting a spacer adjustment, and had asked me to sign away $780,000. For free. With 48 hours notice, while wearing the same polo shirt he'd been wearing when he told me I was on my own. I'm not going to pretend I processed that number calmly. I reorganized Theo's pen cup twice while he was still talking. Then I straightened the stack of K-1 filings even though they were already straight. Then I adjusted the angle of his monitor by approximately 2 degrees, which he noticed but didn't comment on because Theo understands that some people process financial betrayal through furniture adjustment. But the number wasn't the thing that broke me that afternoon. Theo had moved on to the individual property breakdowns, reading through assessed values and tenant statuses with the steady monotone of a man who finds comfort in data, when he stopped. He tapped his pen on the spreadsheet 3 times. Slow. Row 9, he said. I looked at the screen. Row 9, Colorado Springs, 1.2 acres, south side, no structure, vacant land, assessed value $195,000, no tenant, no lien. Registered owner, Beckett Development Partners, LLC. Theo looked at me. I knew that land. I didn't need the address to know it. I didn't need the county assessor's parcel number or the legal description or the GPS coordinates. I knew it by the number of acres and the city and the side of town and the way my entire body went still when I read it. 1.2 acres on the south side of Colorado Springs where the lots get wider and the soil is red-brown clay that somehow grew tomatoes every summer. Where my mother knelt in the dirt and taught me the difference between determinate and indeterminate varieties, and why you pinch the suckers off the stems and how you know a brandy wine is ready, by the way. It gives just slightly when you press your thumb against the skin. My mother's land, Catherine Beckett's land, the land she tended for 23 years, the land I refused to sell, the land that cost me my family. It was in my father's company. Row 9 on a spreadsheet, assessed at $195,000, somewhere between a strip mall in Lakewood and an office suite in the tech center. Theo waited. He didn't say anything. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just waited, pen down, napkin to the side, the way you wait for someone who needs a minute to find the next sentence. How? I said, and even that one word came out quieter than I intended. How did my mother's land end up in his LLC? Theo shook his head. That's not in the K1, he said. The K1 shows the financials, not the story behind them. For that, you'd need the transfer documents. The deed, I nodded. I already knew what I was going to do next. I was going to request those documents from the county recorder. I was going to find the deed that moved my mother's land from her name into Martin's company. And I was going to find out when it happened and how it happened and whether my mother knew what she was signing when she commented out it. Because I had a feeling I already knew the answer to that last question, not a gut feeling. I don't do gut feelings. A data-based inference drawn from the fact that my mother spent the last month of her life on fentanyl patches so strong that some days she didn't know my name, and my father filed the LLC 2 months after her funeral, and her land was sitting in row 9 of his spreadsheet like it had always been there. The numbers didn't add up, and I was going to find out why. El Paso County Recorder's Office processed my request in 6 business days. I wish they'd taken longer. I filed the request on a Monday. Standard public records request, nothing unusual. I asked for any and all recorded deeds, transfers, or conveyances involving the Colorado Springs property and the name Catherine Beckett or Beckett Development Partners, LLC. Clean, specific, documented. Theo helped me draft the language. He said the key to public records requests is precision. You ask for exactly what you want in exactly the language the office expects. Like ordering at a restaurant where the waiter doesn't speak your language, point at the menu, no improvisation. While I waited, I went to work. Amara's follow-up on Tuesday went well. She'd revised her dinosaur rankings and informed me that brachiosauruses are now the nicest because they're tall and gentle, but she still picked a T-Rex sticker from the treasure chest. Loyalty to the brand. Wednesday, Thursday. Sealants, consultations. A 9-year-old who needed a pulpotomy and asked if the tooth fairy pays extra for teeth that have been drilled. I told him I'd heard rumors of a premium rate. His mother mouthed thank you from the doorway. Normal days. Normal work. Except every night after the clinic closed, I sat at my desk with the overheads off and just the lamp on, checking the infrastructure of my life the way you check the foundations of a house before a storm. The records arrived the following Monday. An email with a PDF attachment. Subject line, Records Request Fulfillment. No fanfare, no warning. I opened it at 6:40 in the morning before anyone else had arrived. The fish tank hummed. The dinosaur chairs sat empty. The whole place felt like it was holding its breath. The document was a quitclaim deed, 1 page, filed with the El Paso County Recorder on April 17, 2017. Grantor, Catherine M. Beckett. Grantee, Beckett Development Partners, LLC. My mother's land, transferred from her name into my father's company. April 17th. My mother died on May 1st, 2017. 14 days. The deed was signed 14 days before she died. I scrolled to the signature line. Catherine M. Beckett. The letters were shaky, not the kind of shaky from a pen running out of ink. The kind that comes from a hand that doesn't have the strength to hold a pen properly. The C in Catherine was barely closed. The B in Beckett trailed off like her hand gave up before the word did. Beneath it, a witness line. Deborah A. Fielding. Clean signature, steady hand. Deb Fielding, my father's office assistant for as long as I could remember. She was at my mother's funeral. She brought a green bean casserole with fried onions on top. I couldn't eat it. It sat in the refrigerator for 2 weeks. The smell of fried onions still makes my stomach tighten in a way that has nothing to do with digestion. Deb Fielding watched my mother sign her land away 14 days before she died. I closed my eyes, not because I was overwhelmed, because I was remembering. April 2017, the last month of my mother's life. I was there, in that house, sleeping on the couch next to the hospice bed because I couldn't stand being in my old bedroom knowing she was downstairs alone. The fentanyl patches were on a 72-hour rotation. Every 3 days, a new patch on her upper arm or her chest, wherever there was still skin that wasn't bruised from the IVs. On good days, the pain was manageable. On bad days, it was invisible. But invisible came with a cost. She'd call me by her sister's name. She'd ask for her mother, who had been dead for 20 years. One afternoon, she looked at me and asked who I was. I told her I was her daughter. She smiled and said, "That's nice," like I was a stranger making polite conversation at a bus stop. That was April. That was the month my father put a quitclaim deed in front of her, while I was reading to her from a paperback she'd never finish. While I was lining up her medications in those little plastic day-of-the-week containers. While I was washing her hair in the kitchen sink because she couldn't stand in the shower anymore. He was getting her to sign paperwork. I don't know if she understood what she was signing. I don't know if she could read the words on the page. I don't know if she knew it was a deed and not a grocery list, or a birthday card, or another insurance form addressed to a woman who was dying. But I know what fentanyl does. I'm a medical professional. I know about diminished capacity. I know that a woman on 72-hour transdermal fentanyl patches in the final weeks of stage 4 pancreatic cancer is not a woman who should be signing legal documents. And I know that my father knew that too. He was in that house. He saw what I saw. He watched her ask who I was. And he handed her a pen anyway. I saved the voicemail he left on the clinic line the next morning. 19 seconds. His voice was tight. The kind of tight that comes from a jaw clenched so hard the words squeeze out sideways. Deb had tipped him off. His catalog of people willing to look the other way, sorted by specialty. The voicemail said I was making a mistake, called me little girl, said this was family business and I needed to drop it or I wouldn't like what happened next. Little girl. I'm a 34-year-old woman who built a pediatric dental practice from nothing. I've talked toddlers through their first cleaning. I've extracted baby teeth from kids who kicked me during the procedure and hugged me on the way out. I've held a mother's hand while her son was in surgery for a cleft palate repair I'd coordinated over 6 months. And to him, I'm still a little girl with dirt on her hands from her mother's garden. But here's what I heard underneath the words. Fear. People who aren't worried don't leave voicemails. People who have nothing to hide don't call you little girl and tell you to drop it. That voicemail told me more than the K-1 filings did. Martin Beckett knew exactly what he'd done with that quitclaim deed, and he knew exactly what it would look like if anyone ever pulled it into the light. Good. Now I knew something too. Here's something about me that you should probably know by now. I don't process things by talking. I don't call a friend at midnight and cry into the phone. I don't journal. I don't meditate. I don't take long walks to clear my head. Because long walks don't clear my head, they just give me shin splints and more time alone with thoughts I'm already spending too much time with. I build spreadsheets. When I'm stressed, I organize data. When I'm scared, I organize data faster. When I found out my father had my dying mother sign over her land to his company while she was on fentanyl patches that made her forget her own daughter's name, I went home, opened my laptop, and created a 9-row spreadsheet with columns for address, assessed value, square footage, tenant status, and any recorded liens or encumbrances. All public information: county assessor records, El Paso County, Denver County, Jefferson County, Ada County. Basic stuff that anyone with an internet connection and enough anger could pull together between the hours of 9 at night and 2 in the morning while eating peanut butter out of the jar with a spoon because she'd forgotten to go. Grocery shopping again. I worked on it at the clinic, too. After hours, fluorescent overheads off, desk lamp on, the fish tank humming in the lobby, the dinosaur chairs casting shadows on the mural wall. There's something about a pediatric dental clinic at night. During the day, it's all color and noise and children and chaos. At night, it's just you and the silence and the faint smell of vanilla from the diffuser and the knowledge that everything you've built is more fragile than you thought. Row by row: address, value, tenants, liens. Rows 1 and 2. Strip malls in Lakewood. Combined assessed value around $800,000, both fully leased, nothing unusual. Rows 3 through 5. Office suites in the Denver Tech Center, various sizes. Tenants included a staffing agency, an insurance broker, and a physical therapy practice. Combined value approximately $1.1 million, standard commercial holdings. Row 6, mixed-use building in the Highlands, retail on the ground floor, apartments above, assessed at $650,000, moderate condition based on the county records. Row 7. I built my spreadsheet the way I build treatment plans, row by row, fact by fact. Row 7 stopped me cold. 2040 South Federal Boulevard, Denver, Colorado. 2,700 square feet of commercial space. Current tenant, Rocky Mountain Pediatric Dentistry, LLC. My clinic, my name, my dinosaur chairs and my fish tank and my treasure chest and my 403 5-star reviews. Sitting in row 7 of my father's spreadsheet, I pulled up my lease agreement from the filing cabinet, the same lease I'd signed 30 months ago when I moved the practice from that rented suite that smelled like the dog groomer next door. The lease was between Rocky Mountain Pediatric Dentistry, LLC, that's me, and Pinecrest Management Group, represented by a man named Wade Hargrove. I'd met Wade once. Firm handshake, gray suit, the kind of property manager who speaks in square footage and cap rates and calls you by your first name before you've offered it. I wrote my rent checks to Pinecrest Management Group. $4,200 a month. Every month. On time. For 30 months. But the county assessor records listed the property owner as Beckett Development Partners, LLC, my father's company. I checked twice. Then 3 times. Then I opened the Colorado Secretary of State's business entity search and typed in both names. Pinecrest Management Group, LLC, registered office, 615 North Cascade Avenue, Suite 300, Colorado Springs, Colorado. Beckett Development Partners, LLC, registered office, 615 North Cascade Avenue, Suite 300, Colorado Springs, Colorado. Same address, same suite number. 2 separate companies operating out of the same office. Pinecrest was a screen, a management layer, a puppet with Wade Hargrove's name on the strings and my father's hand underneath. I'd been writing checks to Wade Hargrove, and Wade Hargrove had been forwarding them to Martin Beckett, $4,200 a month, 30 months. I opened the calculator on my phone even though I already knew the number because I'd done the math 3 times in my head and I needed the screen to confirm it so I could stop hoping I was wrong. $126,000. I'd paid my estranged father $126,000 in rent and didn't know it. The man who told me I was on my own, who didn't come to my clinic opening, who didn't acknowledge my existence for 5 years, who had my dying mother sign over her land while I was washing her hair in the kitchen sink. That man had been cashing my checks every single month. Every patient I'd seen, every child I'd calmed, every Medicaid claim I'd filed, every Amara spacer adjustment, every PRIA mentoring session, every nervous 5-year-old I'd talked through a first cleaning. I'd done all of it on his property, built all of it on his ground, and he'd collected the rent like a toll booth on a road I didn't know he owned. If that's not the most expensive silent treatment in the history of the American family, I would genuinely love to meet the competition. I'd buy that woman a coffee and we'd compare spreadsheets. The landlord threat made sense now. "I'll call your landlord," Martin had said that Wednesday in my office. It wasn't a threat to call someone else, it was a threat to call himself. To act through Wade. To threaten my lease because he was the lease. He owned the ground under my dinosaur chairs. I sat at my desk for a long time. Lamp on. Overheads off. Fish tank bubbling in the dark. The spreadsheet glowing on my screen. 9 rows. 9 properties. And one of them was mine in every way except the one that mattered. 3 days later, Wade Hargrove sent a certified letter to the clinic. Notice of lease violation. Claimed that Rocky Mountain Pediatric Dentistry's use of the premises exceeded the permitted commercial use classification under the terms of the lease. Demanded I cure the violation within 30 days or vacate. My hands went cold reading it. Not the scared kind of cold. The kind where your body decides it needs all available blood in your brain because you're about to make plans someone is going to regret. A pediatric dental clinic is explicitly permitted under Denver's commercial zoning code. I knew this because I checked before I signed the lease. I'm a dentist. I read fine print the way other people read recipes. Ingredient by ingredient. Measurement by measurement, looking for anything that might cause a reaction. The lease violation was fabricated. But fabricated or not, it was still a certified letter from a property management company demanding I vacate my clinic in 30 days, and certified letters have a way of making your stomach drop even when you know they're built on nothing. I needed a lawyer, not a general practitioner, not the kind who handles DUIs and fender benders and reviews residential leases for first-time homebuyers. I needed someone who speaks commercial real estate the way Theo speaks tax code. Fluently, aggressively, and with no interest in making the other side feel comfortable. I hired Carmen Reyes on a Wednesday afternoon, $375 an hour. Office on 17th Street in downtown Denver, 8th floor, the kind of building where the lobby has marble floors and a security desk and a directory board with names in gold lettering. Carmen's name was near the top, not because of alphabetical order. Because she'd been there the longest. Her office smelled like toner and old coffee and something faintly floral that I think was coming from the golden retriever sleeping under her desk. His name was Judge. 80 pounds of fur and calm energy sprawled across the carpet like a throw rug with a heartbeat. Carmen had a framed photo of him on her credenza that was larger than any photo of any human in the room. I liked her immediately, not because she was warm. She wasn't. When I explained the situation, she didn't flinch. She didn't say, "Oh, how awful," or "I'm so sorry." She just took notes, asked for the operating agreement, the K-1 filings, the quitclaim deed, and the lease violation letter, and said she'd need the county recorder documents for all 9 properties by Thursday. No sympathy. No outrage. Just a to-do list and a billing clock. My kind of professional. I gave her everything. The operating agreement with my name on it. The K-1S showing 9 properties worth $5.2 million. The quitclaim deed signed 14 days before my mother died. The lease violation from Wade Hargrove. The voicemail I'd saved. She listened to the voicemail once, wrote something on her legal pad, and moved on. Carmen processes information the way surgeons process blood. Clinically, it's there. She notes it. She keeps working. She pulled title work on all 9 properties within 72 hours. And what she found changed the entire board. 2 of the 9 properties, a strip mall on Wadsworth Boulevard in Lakewood and an office suite near the Denver Tech Center, were under an active purchase and sale agreement. A commercial development group was offering $1.8 million for the pair. Standard 30-day due diligence period. Title contingency, the usual framework for commercial real estate transactions in Colorado. But here's where it got interesting. Those same 2 properties had a credit line of $850,000 secured against them, opened 16 months earlier. The borrower was Beckett Development Partners, LLC, and the personal guarantor on the credit line was Donovan Beckett. Donovan, my 29-year-old brother, the one who texted me sign the papers like a parking citation, the one who stood on the stairs and watched me leave through a screen door he didn't bother to close. That Donovan had his name on an $850,000 loan secured by properties he didn't fully own because I owned 15% of them and nobody had asked me. Carmen laid it out at her desk. Judge shifted position underneath, his tail thumping once against the carpet like a gavel. "The closing deadline for the sale is March 26th, Carmen said. "Your father showed up at your clinic on March 5th, 21 days before deadline." She leaned back in her chair. "Without your consent, Article 9.2, unanimous consent, the sale cannot close. Without the sale, the credit line has no exit strategy. The lender will accelerate the loan. The two properties go to the bank. And since your brother personally guaranteed the debt, his personal assets are exposed." She let that settle. His house, his car, everything. I sat there for a long time. Judge stared at me from under the desk with the patient, slightly concerned expression of a dog who has seen many people sit in that chair and process difficult information. 21 days. Martin had shown up at my clinic 21 days before a closing deadline with an $850,000 loan hanging over the family. He hadn't walked in from a position of strength. He hadn't slammed that envelope on my desk because he was in charge. He'd walked in like a man standing at the edge of a swimming pool he built himself, watching the water rise, knowing that the drain was locked and the only person with the key was the daughter he'd erased 5 years ago. The polo shirt, the creased khakis, the "don't make this complicated," the 48-hour deadline. None of it was power. All of it was panic dressed up in a tucked-in shirt. And the 15% he wanted me to sign away for free? My share of the total LLC was worth $780,000. My share of just the sale proceeds from those two properties would be $270,000. He wanted me to hand over $250,000 so he could dig himself out of a hole I didn't know existed, using properties that included my mother's land, transferred while she was dying. Carmen asked me what I wanted to do. She said it without inflection. No leading, no suggestion, just the question. I told her I needed to think. She nodded. Judge's tail thumped once more. I drove back to the clinic, parked in the lot, sat in my Subaru with the engine off. The burrito place 2 doors down was closed, but the smell was still there. It was dark. The clinic windows reflected the parking lot lights back at me. Inside those windows were dinosaur chairs and a fish tank and a treasure chest and the practice I'd built from nothing on ground that belonged to a man who was now drowning in his own decisions. My father hadn't come to my clinic from a position of strength. He'd walked in wearing desperation like an old polo shirt, and I was the only one standing near the edge with something that looked like a rope. The question was whether I wanted to throw it, and what I'd ask for in return. Donovan called that evening. Not a text, an actual phone call. My brother called me on the telephone for the first time since a period in human history when people still paid $1.99 for ringtones and thought it was reasonable. I was in my apartment, standing in the kitchen, reheating leftover pad thai that was 2 days past the point where leftover pad thai should be reheated. I saw his name on the screen and stared at it for 3 full rings. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail. The practical part. The part that had spent 3 weeks being strategically calm and methodically furious, and didn't want to ruin the streak by saying something on the phone that I'd have to apologize for later. I don't apologize well. It's a known limitation. I'm working on it. Slowly, I answered on the 4th ring. His voice was shaking, not the dramatic kind of shaking you hear in movies, where the actor's chin trembles and the music swells. The real kind. The kind that sounds like someone is trying to hold a sentence together the way you hold a cracked plate, carefully, knowing that if you squeeze too hard, the whole thing falls apart in your hands. He told me about the loan, $850,000. He said it like the number tasted bad. He told me about the credit line Martin had opened 16 months ago, secured against the 2 properties now under contract. He told me the money was supposed to fund a renovation project on 2 other properties in Colorado Springs, a project that went over budget by nearly double. The contractors ran long. The permits got delayed. The tenants in the renovated units still hadn't signed new leases because the build-out wasn't finished. Cash flow was, in his words, bad. How bad? I asked. He paused. Then he said, "Kayla doesn't know I might lose the house bad." Kayla. His wife. I'd never met her. I knew she existed because I'd seen the wedding photos on a cousin's social media page 3 years ago. Small ceremony, backyard. Kayla wore a sundress, and Donovan wore a tie that didn't match his shirt, which tracked because Donovan has never once in his life successfully coordinated an outfit. I wasn't invited to the wedding. I found out about it 11 days after it happened, scrolling through my phone at midnight after a long day at the clinic, and I'd stared at the photos for a long time and then closed the app and gone to bed and didn't think about it again until right now. Kayla doesn't know. His wife doesn't know that her husband's name is on an $850,000 loan that could eat their house if a closing deadline passes. His wife doesn't know that his father used him as a personal guarantor the way you'd use a cosigner for a used car, except the car is a commercial credit line and the consequences aren't a ding on your credit score, they're everything you own. Donovan kept talking. He said Martin had told him the sale would close easily. No complications, just paperwork. He said Martin had called my 15% a formality, something that would be handled quickly. He said Martin had never mentioned that I didn't know about the LLC, or that I might not sign, or that there was any risk at all. He said all of this in the voice of a man who had built his life on the assumption that his father knew what he was doing and was just now discovering, at 29, that the foundation was sand. I let him talk. I didn't interrupt. I didn't comfort. I didn't say it's going to be okay, because I didn't know if it was going to be okay, and I'm not the kind of person who says things I can't verify. Dentists don't guess. We diagnose. When he finished, I asked him the question I'd been carrying since the night he texted me to sign the papers. Why didn't you call me, Donovan? Not now. Before. 5 years. Why didn't you pick up the phone once in 5 years? Silence. The kind that fills a room even through a phone speaker. The kind that has texture. I could hear him breathing. I could hear something in the background, maybe a television, maybe Kayla in another room, living her normal evening in a house she didn't know was collateral. Then he said it. Because it was easier. 3 words, no excuse wrapped around them. No, but followed by a justification. No, I wanted to, but Dad said, or I thought about it, but just the raw, undecorated truth delivered in a voice that had stopped shaking because the hardest part wasn't the confession. The hardest part was knowing it was true. Because it was easier. Easier to say nothing. Easier to not call. Easier to let the screen door bang shut and go back inside and pretend that the sister loading boxes into her Subaru would be fine because she was always fine, because she was the one who graduated top of her class and opened her own practice and didn't seem to need anyone. Easier to believe that silence isn't a choice when you know it is. I wanted to be angry. Part of me was. The part that remembered Thanksgiving alone with a grocery store rotisserie chicken eaten standing over the sink. The part that opened her clinic with no family in the room. The part that still had the unsigned birthday cards from a P.O. box in Caldwell that my mother's sister sent every year because at least someone in the extended family remembered I existed. But another part of me, the part that heard his voice crack on the word easier, understood something I didn't want to understand. Donovan wasn't the architect of this family. He was furniture. Martin arranged him where he was useful, and Donovan stayed because staying was all he knew. He didn't have a plan. He had proximity to a man with a plan, and he mistook that for safety. That doesn't make it okay. It makes it explainable. And those are 2 very different things. I told him I'd be in touch. I didn't promise anything else. He said okay. The line went quiet. I hung up. The pad thai was cold. I threw it out. I wasn't hungry anymore. That night, I drove past the clinic on my way to nowhere in particular. Engine running, windows down. The March air in Denver is the kind of cold that doesn't bite. It just leans against you and reminds you that spring is a concept, not a guarantee. The clinic was dark. The dinosaur chairs were shadows. The fish tank light was the only thing on, casting a blue-green glow through the front window like an aquarium in an empty house. Priya was still there. Amara was still coming back next month. Grace was still running the front desk like a quiet general. The clinic was still standing. But it was standing on someone else's ground, financed by someone else's debt, and the man who owned the ground and owed the debt was my father, and the man who guaranteed that debt was my brother, and both of them needed the one thing only I could give. I parked in the lot, turned off the engine, sat there. Everything smelled like someone else's dinner and someone else's debt and someone else's silence. I drove home, parked, sat in the driveway for another 4 minutes because the engine was off but my brain wasn't, and sometimes you need to let them both cool down at the same rate. My apartment is a 2-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a building in Harvey Park. I use the 2nd bedroom as an office, which sounds professional until you see it. A thrift store desk, a filing cabinet that doesn't fully close, and a stack of dental journals on a chair I keep meaning to sit in. The kitchen is small. The living room is smaller. The couch has a stain on the left cushion that was there when I bought it and that I've chosen to accept as a design feature rather than investigate. I dropped my bag by the door, opened the refrigerator, closed it, opened the pantry, found a box of cereal that was almost empty and a jar of peanut butter that was actually empty, but that I'd put back on the shelf anyway because apparently I'm the kind of person who returns empty containers to their original location like some kind of sad domestic museum exhibit. I poured the cereal into a bowl. No milk. Third week in a row I'd forgotten grocery shopping, which at this point wasn't forgetfulness, it was a lifestyle choice. I ate the cereal dry standing at the counter, then stopped standing because my feet hurt from a 10-hour day and the floor seemed closer and more honest than any chair in the apartment. So I sat on the kitchen floor, 11 at night, bowl of dry cereal, back against the cabinet, legs stretched out on linoleum that needed mopping. This is the glamorous life of a female small business owner in America. If anyone's making a documentary, I'm available. I opened my laptop, balanced it on my knees. The transfer document was still in my downloads folder between a dental supply catalog and a receipt for fish food. I opened my email, started a new message, typed Martin's address in the to field, 2 words in the body. I'll sign. My thumb hovered over send. I stared at those 2 words the way you stare at an exit sign in a building you're not sure you want to leave. I'll sign. 2 words and all of this goes away. No more spreadsheets. No more Carmen at $375 an hour. No more Theo doing math on napkins. No more Donovan's voice cracking on the word easier. No more Martin in my lobby. No more lease violations. No more quitclaim deeds signed by dying women. No more rows on a spreadsheet that keep revealing new ways my father monetized my absence. I'd lose the money, $780,000. I'd lose the leverage. Article 9.2. Unanimous consent. The lock he built that I held the key to. I'd lose the right to ask questions about my mother's land. I'd lose the claim, the standing, the legal basis for everything Carmen was building. But I'd also lose the weight. 3 weeks of weight sitting on my chest like a second skeleton. The weight of knowing what my father did while my mother was dying. The weight of voicemails that called me little girl. The weight of a brother who said because it was easier and meant it. Losing the weight sounded pretty good at 11 at night on a kitchen floor with no milk. I almost sent it. My thumb was on the trackpad. 1 click and Sloane Beckett signs away $780,000. Her mother's land, her leverage, her questions, everything, for nothing in exchange for the privilege of not thinking about it anymore. 1 click and Martin wins. Not because he was right, but because I was tired. Then I looked up. There's 1 photo on my kitchen wall. Just 1. I'm not a decorator. The walls are the same rental beige they were when I moved in, but there's 1 photo, framed, hung with a nail I hammered in myself the first night before I'd unpacked the dishes. Me and my mother in the garden. I'm 12. She's 40. She's kneeling in the dirt next to a tomato plant taller than I am, laughing at something I said that I can't remember anymore. Her hands are covered in red-brown Colorado clay. My hands are covered in the same clay. Our knees are dirty. The sun is behind us. You can see the shadow of whoever took the photo, probably my father, stretching across the garden bed. She's wearing a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up. I'm wearing a t-shirt with a print so faded I can't read it anymore, but I can see her face, clear as the day it was taken, laughing, alive. Hands in the dirt she loved. I closed the laptop. I didn't send it. I sat on that kitchen floor for a long time looking at that photo, at her hands, at the dirt, at the tomato plant taller than 12-year-old me, at the shadow of the man who would one day put a pen in her dying hand and ask her to sign that dirt away. My mother didn't raise me to sit on a kitchen floor and give things away to men who take from women who can't fight back. She raised me in a garden. She taught me that you plant deep and you water consistently and you don't pull things up by the root just because someone tells you the soil isn't yours. Catherine Beckett grew tomatoes in clay that everyone said was too hard. She'd have grown them in concrete if she had to. I closed the email, deleted the draft, put the laptop on the counter, washed my face, brushed my teeth, because I'm a dentist and some things are non-negotiable even during an existential crisis. Went to bed. I woke up at 5:45 with a clarity I hadn't felt since the morning I decided to open my own practice. The kind that doesn't come from rest. It comes from decision. From the moment your brain stops asking what should I do and starts asking how do I do it, I knew exactly what I wanted. And for the first time in 3 weeks, I knew exactly how to get it. I called Carmen Reyes at 7:14 in the morning. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she was already at her desk, which meant Judge was already under her desk, which meant I was not the only person in Denver whose Tuesday started before the sun finished deciding whether to show up. I said I needed a counterproposal. She said, how aggressive? I said, aggressive enough that he signs, but clean enough that a judge would frame it. She laughed once and said, come in at 9. I was there at 8:47. Judge lifted his head when I walked in, decided I was not a threat, and went back to sleep. Carmen had a yellow legal pad, 2 pens, and a ceramic mug that said objection in red letters. She told me to sit down and talk slowly. So I did. I told her everything. The 9 properties, the $5.2 million appraisal, the 15% membership interest that made me a silent partner in a company I never joined, the quitclaim deed my dying mother signed 14 days before her last breath, the fentanyl patches, the shaking signature, Deborah Fielding witnessing a document she had no business witnessing, the credit line, the $850,000 loan Donovan guaranteed with his name and his house and his wife's ignorance, the 2 properties under contract for $1.8 million. The closing date, March 26th. The cure or vacate notice from Wade Hargrove at Pinecrest Management Group, which was not a real management company but a forwarding address for my father's decisions. Carmen wrote for 11 minutes straight. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she looked at her pad, then at me, then at Judge, then back at me. She said 3 things. First, the quitclaim deed was potentially voidable under undue influence. A woman on 72-hour fentanyl patches signing away property to her husband's company, witnessed by his own employee 2 weeks before death. That was not a gift. That was a taking. Second, Article 9.2 gave me absolute veto power over the sale. Without my consent, the $1.8 million closing could not proceed. The buyer walks. The loan accelerates. Donovan loses everything. Third, and this was the part that mattered, she said I did not have to use any of it. She said leverage is not a weapon. Leverage is a chair. You sit in it or you don't. I sat in it. We drafted the counterproposal in 2 hours and 14 minutes. Carmen typed. I paced. Judge watched us both like a furry bailiff. The document was 4 pages, single-spaced, and it asked for 3 things. 1. $270,000. That was my 15% share of the $1.8 million sale proceeds. Not the $780,000. My full membership was worth across all 9 properties. Just the sale. Just what was closing. I was not trying to dismantle the company. I was trying to collect what was mine from the transaction that required my signature. 2. Transfer of the quitclaim deed. The 1.2-acre parcel in Colorado Springs, my mother's land, returned to my name within 30 days of closing. No conditions, no encumbrances, no shell company, just dirt and memory and a garden that had not been planted in 7 years. 3. Direct lease assignment. My clinic lease at 2040 South Federal Boulevard would be reassigned from Pinecrest Management Group to Rocky Mountain Pediatric Dentistry LLC. My company, my name, my lease. Plus, a right of first refusal to purchase the building within 36 months at fair market value, determined by independent appraisal. No more paying rent to a father who pretended to be a stranger. No more wondering if the building I built my practice in could be sold out from under me while I was filling a 6-year-old's cavity. Carmen printed 3 copies. She placed them in a manila envelope, not because it needed to be manila, but because she said presentation matters, and she was not wrong. I signed the cover letter at 11:22 in the morning. Carmen notarized it. Judge did not notarize anything, but he did sneeze, which I took as approval. We sent it by certified mail and by email. The email went to Martin Beckett's personal address. The certified copy went to 615 North Cascade Avenue, Suite 300, Colorado Springs, Colorado. The same address listed on the operating agreement, the same address listed on Wade Hargrove's letterhead, the same address that had been collecting my rent checks for 30 months. Carmen said he would respond in one of 3 ways. He would accept because the math favored him. He would reject because his pride did not. Or he would call Donovan first, because that was what Martin always did when he needed someone else to carry the weight. I drove back to the clinic. Grace was at the front desk. Priya was in operatory 2. The fish tank was clean. Amara was not on the schedule that day, which was probably for the best, because I did not have it in me to be gentle with anyone under 4 feet tall. I sat in my office. I looked at the desk where my father had placed his envelope 3 weeks earlier. The ranch dressing stain was gone. Grace had cleaned it. But the scratch from where he had pushed the papers toward me was still there. A thin white line in the laminate, like a scar that had not decided whether to fade. I opened my laptop. No new emails, no voicemails, no texts from Donovan, just silence. The kind of silence that happens when someone is reading something they did not expect to receive. 48 hours. That was what my father had given me. I gave him the same courtesy. 48 hours to accept, reject, or call his son. The clock started at 11:22 on a Tuesday morning in March. By Thursday morning, I would know whether my father valued his company more than his pride, or whether pride was the only thing he had left that nobody could appraise. Donovan showed up on Wednesday afternoon, not Thursday, not after the 48 hours expired, Wednesday, which meant Martin had called him before the certified mail even arrived, which meant Martin had read the email, which meant Martin was scared enough to deploy his son before the clock ran out. I was in operatory 3 when Grace knocked on the doorframe. She did not say, "Your brother is here." She said, "There is a man in the lobby who looks like a younger version of the man from last time, and he is sitting in the Triceratops chair." I told her I would be out in 10 minutes. She said he looks like he has been sitting in things he does not want to sit in for a long time. Grace had a way of saying things that sounded like observations, but were actually diagnoses. I finished the cleaning on a 9-year-old named Marcus, told his mother his gums looked great, washed my hands, removed my gloves, and walked into the lobby. Donovan was in the Triceratops, not the T-Rex, which was where our father had sat. The Triceratops was smaller, lower to the ground, designed for kids between 5 and 8. Donovan was 29. His knees were near his chest. He was wearing a gray Henley and jeans that looked like they had been ironed, which meant Kayla had ironed them, which meant Kayla still did not know why her husband was in Denver on a Wednesday. He looked up at me and said, "Hey." I said, "Hey." 2 people who shared a mother and a last name and nothing else, standing in a room decorated with cartoon molars and a poster that said, "Brush like a boss." I did not invite him into my office. I pulled a chair from the waiting area and sat across from him in the lobby. Grace pretended to organize files. Priya walked past once, looked at Donovan, looked at me, and kept walking. The fish tank hummed. Donovan spoke first. He said, "Dad got your letter." I said it was not a letter, it was a counter-proposal drafted by an attorney. He said, "Same thing." I said it was not the same thing, and that was exactly the kind of thinking that got us here. He exhaled. He rubbed his palms on his iron jeans. Then he said something I did not expect. He said he wanted to offer me $50,000 out of his own money, separate from the counter-proposal. $50,000 to walk away from everything, sign the transfer, let the sale close, and never mention the quitclaim deed again. I asked him where he got $50,000. He said savings. I asked him if Kayla knew about the savings. He did not answer. I asked him if Kayla knew about the $850,000 credit line. He did not answer that either. His silence had a shape to it, like a box he had been carrying for months that he could not put down because there was nowhere clean to set it. I told him no. I said it quietly. Not because I was being kind, but because the lobby had a child in operatory 2 and sound carries in a dental clinic built for small people. He asked why. I said because $50,000 is not $270,000, and it is not my mother's land, and it is not a lease with my name on it. I said because you are offering me your money to solve Dad's problem, and that is what you have been doing since you were 23 years old, and that is what because it was easier actually looks like when you write a check. He looked at the floor. The floor was vinyl, pale blue, chosen because it hides scuff marks from children who drag their feet when they are nervous. Donovan was dragging his feet in a different way, but the vinyl handled it the same. He said, "Sloan, if the sale does not close, I lose the house." I said, "I know." He said, "Kayla is pregnant, 3 months." The fish tank hummed. Grace stopped pretending to organize files. I could feel Priya standing somewhere behind the hallway wall, listening the way people listen when they know the conversation is not theirs, but the weight of it is. I looked at my brother. He was 29 years old and sitting in a dinosaur chair built for a child and telling me his wife was pregnant and asking me to save him by giving away my inheritance. And the worst part was not that he was asking. The worst part was that he meant it. He was not manipulating. He was drowning. I told him 3 things. First, I was not going to sign away my share for $50,000. Second, if the counter-proposal was accepted, the sale would close on time, Donovan's credit line would be resolved, and Kayla's house would be safe. Third, and I needed him to hear this, the counter-proposal was not designed to punish anyone. It was designed to collect what was mine and protect what was my mother's. If Martin signed, everyone walked away whole. Even Martin. Donovan asked what happens if Dad does not sign. I said, then your attorney and my attorney will have a very expensive conversation about a quitclaim deed signed by a woman on fentanyl, and nobody wins that. He nodded. He stood up. The Triceratops chair rocked slightly when he pushed himself out of it, the way it does when a child jumps out after being told they have no cavities. Donovan did have cavities. Metaphorical ones. Deep ones that had been forming for years in the spaces where a family should have been. He walked toward the door. Then he stopped and turned around. He said, I did not know about the land. About Mom's deed. I found out the same night you called. I swear. I believed him. Not because his voice cracked or because his eyes were wet, though both of those things were true. I believed him because Donovan had never been the architect. He had always been the building. Martin designed things. Donovan held them up. He left. The lobby smelled like antiseptic and ironed denim and something I could not name but recognized from childhood. It smelled like the moment after someone in your family tells you something true and you realize the truth does not fix anything. It just rearranges the furniture. I sat in the waiting area for 6 minutes. Grace brought me water in a paper cup with cartoon sharks on it. I drank it. Then I went back to Operatory 3 because Marcus's mother had a question about fluoride varnish, and the world does not pause for family wreckage. 17 hours left on the clock. Martin had not called. But Donovan had come, and Donovan had offered his own money, and Donovan's wife was pregnant, and none of those things changed the math, but all of them changed the weight. The 48 hours expired on Thursday morning at 11:22. I know because I was holding a composite filling gun in Operatory 1 when my phone buzzed on the counter and the screen said Martin Beckett and the time said 11:19, which meant he had waited until 3 minutes before the deadline because that is who my father is. A man who arrives at the last possible second and calls it punctuality. I did not answer. I was mid-procedure on a 7-year-old named Oliver, who had a cavity on his lower left first molar, and whose mother was watching from the corner chair with the kind of focus that mothers have when someone is putting sharp instruments near their child's mouth. I finished the filling. I cured the composite. I told Oliver he was brave and handed him a sticker of a penguin wearing sunglasses. Then I removed my gloves, washed my hands, and walked into my office. I closed the door. I sat down. I pressed play on the voicemail. My father's voice was flat. Not angry, not conciliatory. Flat, like a man reading terms he had already decided to reject, but had not yet figured out how to reject without losing more than he could afford. The message was 41 seconds long. He said he had received the counter-proposal. He said his attorney had reviewed it. He said the terms were, and I am quoting directly, unreasonable in scope and presumptuous in tone. He said he was willing to discuss a modified arrangement. He said I had 17 days before the closing date of March 26th, and that if I wanted to talk, I should call his attorney, not him. 17 days, not 48 hours. 17 days. He had taken my deadline and stretched it into his own timeline, which was the closing date, which was the only date that mattered, which was the date the buyer's wire would either land or evaporate. He was not negotiating. He was running out the clock and hoping I would panic. I called Carmen. She picked up on the first ring. Judge barked once in the background. I read her the voicemail. She was quiet for 4 seconds, which is a long time for Carmen Reyes to be quiet. Then she said 3 words. He is bluffing, she explained. If Martin's attorney had actually found a weakness in the counter-proposal, the voicemail would have been specific. It would have cited clauses. It would have named numbers. Instead, it used words like unreasonable and presumptuous, which are not legal terms. They are emotional terms. They are the words a man uses when he has been outmaneuvered and wants the other person to feel guilty about it. Carmen said, "We do nothing. We wait. We let 17 days become 16, then 15, then 14. Every day that passes, the closing gets closer. Every day that passes, the buyer's patience thins. Every day that passes, Donovan's credit line accrues interest at 7.25%. Every day that passes, Martin's leverage shrinks, and mine stays exactly the same size because Article 9.2 does not expire. My veto power does not have a deadline. His sale does." I asked her what happens if he calls my bluff. She said, "You are not bluffing. You have avoidable quitclaim deed, an operating agreement that requires unanimous consent, and a brother whose personal guarantee is worth more than your father's pride." She said the only person bluffing in this transaction is the one who used the word presumptuous in a voicemail. I hung up. I sat in my office for 7 minutes. I looked at the thin white scratch on my desk where Martin had pushed the manila envelope 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks. 21 days ago, I was a pediatric dentist who thought her biggest problem was whether to replace the autoclave or repair it. Now I was a 15% member of a $4.2 million real estate company, a landlord's secret tenant, a daughter holding a dead woman's deed, and a sister whose brother's unborn child depended on whether an old man could swallow his pride before March 26th. The phone buzzed again. Not Martin, Donovan, a text. 1 sentence. "He's not going to call you back." I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted it. Then I wrote 5 words and pressed send. He doesn't need to call. Because he didn't. The counter-proposal was not a conversation. It was a document. It did not require discussion. It required a signature. Carmen had built it that way on purpose. There was no room for Martin to negotiate because there was nothing to negotiate. The numbers were fair. The terms were clean. The law was on my side. The only thing standing between the closing and the collapse was a man who could not admit that his daughter had read the spreadsheet better than he had. Days passed. I worked. Priya worked. Grace answered phones. The fish tank hummed. Oliver came back for a follow-up and his filling looked perfect. Amara was on the schedule for Thursday of the following week. Renata confirmed the appointment. The clinic ran the way clinics run when the person in charge has decided that the building will not fall down, even if the ground beneath it belongs to someone who wishes it would. On day 9, Carmen emailed. 1 line. Opposing counsel requested the appraisal clause language. They're reading Article 11.4. That was the independent appraisal clause, the 60-day freeze, the one Theo had circled in red at the coffee shop 5 weeks ago. Martin's attorney had finally found it, which meant Martin's attorney had finally understood that if I invoked it, the closing would not just be delayed, it would be dead. 60 days past March 26th is late May. No buyer waits until late May. No lender extends a bridge loan until late May. No credit line at 7.25% survives until late May without someone losing a house. They were not calling my bluff. They were reading the room, and the room said, "Sign." On day 12, Priya asked if we could talk. Not in the break room, not between patients. She said after hours, which meant it was not about a clinical question or the autoclave, which had started making a sound like a tired accordion every 3rd cycle. After hours meant she had been thinking about something long enough that it needed its own silence. We sat in Operatory 4 at 6:15 in the evening. The overhead light was off. The only glow came from the hallway and the fish tank 2 rooms away. Priya sat in the dentist's chair, not the patient's chair, which was unusual. Sitting in the dentist's chair meant she wanted to feel like the one in control. She told me about the corporate offer. Not the first time. She had mentioned it weeks ago, 30% higher salary, signing bonus, full benefits, no Medicaid patients, no dinosaur chairs. But this time she said they had sent a second offer, 40% higher. Relocation assistance, a 3-year contract with a performance bonus that would clear half her student loans by year 2, $400,000 in debt. I had known that number since the day I hired her. She told me during the interview with the kind of directness that made me offer her the job on the spot. She said, "I have $400,000 in loans, and I need a clinic that will not waste my time." I said I have a fish tank that cost $800 and a sticker drawer that children would commit felonies for. She said that sounds like a clinic that does not waste time. Now the math had changed. Not because the corporate offer was better, because the ground had shifted. She had heard things. She knew about the lease dispute. She knew about Pinecrest. She did not know about the LLC or the quitclaim deed or the counterproposal, but she knew something was wrong with the foundation, and Priya was the kind of person who checked foundations before she checked ceilings. She asked me directly, "Is this clinic going to exist in 6 months?" I told her the building situation was complicated, but that I was resolving it. I told her I had legal counsel, a counter-proposal in play that would secure the lease and guarantee our tenancy for at least 36 months. I told her I could not share the details because they involved family and attorneys and a dead woman's signature, and that combination does not fit neatly into a conversation, even when the conversation happens in an operatory after dark. She was quiet. The fish tank hummed. Then she said something I have replayed more times than I want to admit. She said, "I am not leaving, Sloan." She said it the way you say something you have already decided, and the conversation is just the formality. The corporate chain would pay her more and clear her debt faster and give her a parking spot and a benefits package that included vision, which was ironic for a dental clinic. But she said she did not become a dentist to fill teeth in a building where no one under 18 was allowed to be scared. She said she became a dentist because her mother could not afford one, and she swore she would never work in a place that turned away a child because of an insurance card. She said, "Your clinic takes Medicaid, your clinic has a sticker drawer. Your clinic has a 7-year-old named Amara who draws pictures of teeth with faces on them and gives them to the front desk like they are gallery submissions." She said, "I am not leaving that for a parking spot." I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. My eyes adjusted to the low light in a way that required blinking. That is a different thing. I thanked her. She said, "Do not thank me, just fix whatever is happening with the building." I said I was working on it. She said, "Good, because the autoclave sounds like it is dying and I cannot fix the autoclave and the landlord situation at the same time." I laughed. She did not. She was serious about the autoclave. She left at 6:40. I stayed in the dentist's chair she had just been in. It was still warm. I thought about what it means to build something that other people are willing to fight for. Not because you asked them to, because the thing itself was worth it. The next morning, day 13, Martin Beckett walked into the clinic for the second time. Grace did not knock this time. She came directly into operatory 2 and said, "He is back. He is in the T-Rex." I finished the prep for Amara's 9:30 appointment. I washed my hands. I told Grace to bring him water in a paper cup with cartoon sharks and to tell him I would be with him when I was ready. Not when he was ready. When I was ready. Amara arrived at 9:27 with Renata. She was wearing a purple backpack and carrying a drawing. She handed it to Grace and said, "This one has braces." Grace taped it to the wall behind the front desk next to the 11 other drawings Amara had given us over the past year. Martin watched from the T-Rex. He did not say anything. He watched a 7-year-old girl hand a drawing of a smiling tooth with braces to a woman at a desk in a clinic that his daughter had built on land that his company owned with money that his wife had died on. I saw him watching. And for the first time in 5 years and 3 weeks and 17 days, I saw something in my father's face that was not control and was not anger and was not strategy. It was fatigue, not the kind from missing sleep. The kind that comes from carrying a thing so long you forget it, is heavy until a child walks past you with a purple backpack and you realize you have been holding the wrong thing the entire time. I finished Amara's appointment at 10:04. 2 sealants on her upper first molars, no cavities, perfect cooperation. She gave me a high five with a hand that smelled like grape sanitizer and told me she wanted to be a dentist when she grew up. Renata scheduled the 6-month follow-up and walked Amara out through the lobby where my father was still sitting in a T-Rex chair holding a paper cup with cartoon sharks on it. Amara waved at him on the way out. She waved at everyone. Martin did not wave back, but he watched her leave, and something about the way he held the paper cup changed. He held it with both hands, like a man holding something warm on a cold day, except the water was room temperature and the clinic was 72 degrees. I told Grace to hold whatever it is I get. She said understood and went back to the front desk with the energy of someone who knew the next 30 minutes would determine whether she needed to update her resume. Martin was already standing in my office doorway. He had moved from the T-Rex without being invited, which was exactly what he had done 5 years ago when he moved my mother's land into his company without being asked. I sat behind my desk. He sat across from me. Same chair, Same desk, same scratch in the laminate. But the envelope was gone, and the only thing between us was air and 7 years of choices neither of us could undo. He said, "Your counterproposal is aggressive." I said, "It is accurate." He said, "$270,000 is more than fair for a partial sale." I said, "I know." He said, "The lease assignment complicates the management structure." I said, "The management structure is a forwarding address and a man named Wade Hargrove who sends certified mail on your behalf." He said, "The land is not negotiable." I said, "The land is the only thing that is negotiable." I said, "Everything else is math. The $270,000 is math. The lease assignment is logistics. The right of first refusal is standard commercial practice. But the land is a 1.2-acre parcel in Colorado Springs where your wife grew tomatoes and signed a quitclaim deed while fentanyl was dripping into her arm, and your office assistant witnessed it 14 days before she died. That is not a negotiation point. That is a correction." The fish tank hummed from 2 rooms away. Grace was typing at the front desk, the soft click of keys that meant she was either answering emails or listening to every word that carried down the hallway. Martin looked at the scratch on the desk. Then he said something I had not heard in 5 years. He said, "Your mother wanted you to have it." I let the sentence sit in the room the way you let a radiograph develop, giving it time to show what is beneath the surface. 6 words. He could have said them 5 years ago. He could have said them the day she died. He could have said them instead of filing a quitclaim deed and hiding a parcel inside a limited liability company and collecting my rent for 30 months through a shell management group. But he said them now, in my office, in my clinic, sitting across from a desk that I paid for in a building that I built. I asked him one question. "Do you remember her tomatoes?" He blinked. Not a dramatic blink, a small contraction of muscles around the eyes, the kind that happens when a memory arrives without permission and the body responds before the mind can stop it. He said yes. She grew early girls and Cherokee purples, and one summer she tried brandywines, but the altitude was wrong, and they split on the vine. He said she used to leave baskets on the neighbors' porches without knocking, because she said, "If you knock, then it becomes a transaction, and tomatoes should be a gift." I said, "Then you know what that land is. It is not a row on a spreadsheet. It is not assessed value $195,000. It is the place where your wife was happy, and where your daughter remembers her being happy, and where a quitclaim deed should never have been signed." He was quiet for a long time, long enough that I could hear the autoclave finishing its cycle with that tired accordion exhale, long enough that Grace stopped typing. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a pen, a plain black ballpoint, the kind you get at a bank. He placed it on my desk next to the scratch and said, "Where do I sign?" I printed 3 copies of the counterproposal on the same printer I use for treatment plans and coloring pages when the sticker drawer runs low. I placed them in front of him with a blue pen because Carmen had told me original signatures should be in blue ink so they are distinguishable from photocopies. He picked up the blue pen. He signed all 3 copies. Page 4, line 31, Martin R. Beckett. His handwriting was steady, not shaky like my mother's had been on the quitclaim deed. Steady, because he was not dying and he was not on fentanyl and he was not confused. He was just a man in a dental clinic signing a document that gave his daughter what should have been hers all along. He did not say, "I am sorry." He did not say, "I love you." He said, "The closing is March 25th now, moved up 1 day. Your attorney will receive confirmation by end of business." Then he walked out past the fish tank, past the front desk, past the 11 drawings of teeth with faces taped to the wall, past Grace, who did not look up, and past the lobby where the T-Rex chair was still slightly reclined from where he had been sitting. The door closed. I sat at my desk. The blue pen was still there. The black pen was still there. The scratch was still there. And on my printer tray, still warm, were 3 signed copies of a document that returned my mother's land, secured my clinic, and paid me $270,000 for a membership interest I never knew I had in a company I never asked to join. I called Carmen. She answered on the first ring. I said he signed. She said all 3 copies. I said all 3. She was quiet for 2 seconds. Then she said, "Good. Now we close." The closing happened on March 25th at 2 in the afternoon in a conference room on the 14th floor of a building on 17th Street in downtown Denver, Carmen's office. Not Martin's attorney's office. Carmen had insisted on that because you close on your own ground or you do not close at all. I wore a navy blouse and gray slacks and the same shoes I wear to the clinic. which are not conference room shoes, but are the shoes of a woman who stands 9 hours a day fixing children's teeth. Carmen wore a black blazer. Judge was not present because the building had a no pets policy, which Carmen said was the only law she disagreed with on principle. Martin arrived at 1:55 with his attorney, Gerald Fitzpatrick, from a firm in Colorado Springs whose business card had too many words on it. Donovan was not there. I had not expected him to be. Donovan had carried the message, absorbed the weight, and stepped aside so the people with pens could finish what the people with silence had started. Carmen had arranged the documents in 3 stacks. Stack 1 was the sale. 2 properties from the LLC portfolio contracted at $1.8 million. The buyer was a commercial group out of Fort Collins. What mattered was the allocation sheet and the line that said Beckett, Sloan M, 15%, $270,000. Stack 2 was the lease assignment. My clinic at 2040 South Federal Boulevard, 2,700 square feet, 4 operatories, 1 fish tank. Reassigned from Pinecrest Management Group LLC to Rocky Mountain Pediatric Dentistry LLC, my company. My name. No more Shell. No more Wade Hargrove. The assignment included a right of first refusal to purchase the building within 36 months at fair market value, plus a clause requiring 60 days written notice before any sale. No more manila envelopes on a Tuesday morning. Stack 3 was the quitclaim deed. 1 page. The 1.2-acre parcel in Colorado Springs, Lot 14, Block 7, Cheyenne Meadows Filing 3, transferred from Beckett Development Partners LLC to Sloan M. Beckett, no conditions, no encumbrances, just dirt and memory and a garden that had not been planted in 7 years. Gerald reviewed each stack, made 2 comments about indemnification language. Carmen responded to both in under 30 seconds. Martin said nothing. He sat at the end of the table with his hands flat on the surface and his eyes on the window overlooking the city where his daughter had built a practice he tried to leverage and failed. We signed for 40 minutes. Blue ink. Carmen had brought 4 pens because she said, "You never trust a closing to a single pen." I signed 11 times. Martin signed 9 times. Gerald witnessed. Carmen notarized. The title company representative, Sandra, handled the recording documents with the calm demeanor of someone who had seen families sign away worse things than pride. At 2:43, Sandra confirmed all documents were executed and would be filed with the El Paso County Recorder and the Denver County Clerk by end of business. Wire transfer initiated within 24 hours. She shook hands and left. Martin stood. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at me for approximately 3 seconds, which is a long time when a father is looking at a daughter he erased for 5 years and has just signed a document returning her dead mother's land. He did not say goodbye. He said, "Your mother would have liked your clinic." Then he walked out and Gerald followed and the door closed and the 14th floor was quiet. Carmen looked at me. She said, "How do you feel?" I said, "I do not know yet." She said, "That is the correct answer." She said the feeling comes later, usually around 11 at night when you are doing something ordinary like washing dishes, and your brain finally decides it is safe to process what happened. She said, "When it comes, let it." I drove back to the clinic at 3:20. Grace was at the front desk. Priya was in operatory too. The fish tank was clean. The autoclave made its tired accordion sound. Everything was exactly as I had left it, except that now the building was mine. Not owned, leased, but leased to me, in my name, with a right to buy it, and that was close enough that the difference did not matter. The next morning at 9:14, my phone buzzed. Wire transfer received, $270,000, from the title company escrow account into the operating account of Rocky Mountain Pediatric Dentistry LLC. I stared at the number. It was not $780,000. It was not the full value of my 15% across all 9 properties. It was the fair share of one transaction. The transaction that needed my signature under Article 9.2 of an operating agreement I never signed, but was bound to because my father filed it 2 months after my mother died. $270,000. It would cover the new autoclave. It would cover the loan assistance program for Priya I had been wanting to start. It would cover the second fish tank Grace had been requesting because she said 1 fish tank is calming, but 2 fish tanks is an aquarium, and children love aquariums. But mostly, it covered the distance between being a woman whose family erased her and being a woman who erased the debt. That afternoon, Carmen emailed. The quitclaim deed had been recorded. Lot 14, Block 7, Cheyenne Meadows, Filing 3. Owner of record, Sloan M. Beckett. My mother's land. In my name. 7 years after it should have been. I printed the recording confirmation on the same printer I use for treatment plans and coloring pages. I folded it once and put it in my desk drawer next to a photograph of my mother holding a basket of Cherokee purple tomatoes, smiling at someone behind the camera who might have been me or might have been no one, because my mother smiled at gardens the same way she smiled at people, like everything growing was worth her attention. I drove to Colorado Springs on a Saturday, 2 weeks after the closing, not because I needed to. Because the land was not going anywhere and neither was I, and sometimes the things that are not going anywhere are exactly the things you need to visit before they start feeling like they belong to a spreadsheet instead of a person. The drive from Denver takes about an hour and 12 minutes if you take I-25 south and do not stop. I stopped once at a gas station in Castle Rock because my car needed fuel and I needed a moment to sit in a parking lot and breathe the way you breathe when you are about to see something you have not seen in 7 years and you are not, I'm sure if it will look the way you remember or the way you are. Afraid it will. Donovan was meeting me there. He had texted 3 days earlier. 4 words. Can I come too? I said yes. Because whatever Donovan was, whatever he had done and not done and carried and dropped, he was still the other person on earth who remembered our mother's garden without having to look at a photograph. I turned off the highway at exit 141 and drove west through a neighborhood that looked the same as it had when I was 12, except the trees were taller and someone had built a Starbucks on the corner where there used to be a feed store. The road narrowed. The houses spread apart. And then, there it was. 1.2 acres. Lot 14, Block 7. Cheyenne Meadows, Filing 3. Owner of record, Sloan M. Beckett. My mother's land. The house was still there. A single-story ranch with tan siding and a green roof that my father had never repainted because he said the color was fine, and my mother said the color was not the point. The point was that painting a house together is what married people do on Saturdays. They never painted it. The garden was behind the house. Or what had been the garden. 7 years of nothing had turned it into a rectangle of dry grass and volunteer weeds and one wooden raised bed that had collapsed on its left side like a tired knee. The soil was pale and hard. The tomato cages were gone. The hose was coiled near the back door, cracked and sun-bleached. The fence post where my mother used to hang her gloves was still standing, but the hook was rusted and the gloves were gone. I stood at the edge and I did not cry. I had done my crying on a kitchen floor in Denver at 11 at night eating dry cereal. This was something else. This was standing on ground that belonged to me in a legal sense and to my mother in every other sense, and understanding that those two things were not the same, but they were close enough. Donovan pulled up at 10:15 in a gray truck that Kayla had probably washed that morning because it was too clean for a man who guaranteed an $850,000 credit line. He walked across the yard and stood next to me. He did not say anything for a while. We looked at the garden together the way two people look at a place where someone they loved used to be happy and is not anymore because the person is gone, but the place remains and the place does not know the difference. He said it looks smaller. I said it was always this size. He said I know, but it looks smaller. I said that is because we are bigger. He almost smiled. I asked about Kayla. I said congratulations. He said thank you. I said, do you know the gender? He said girl. I said, have you picked a name? He was quiet. Then he said Kayla wants to name her Catherine. The wind came through the yard and moved the dry grass and made the collapsed raised bed creak, and I stood there on my mother's land next to my brother, who I had not spoken to in 5 years until 3 weeks ago when he sat in a triceratops chair and offered me $50,000 to go away, and I thought about a girl who would be born in 6 months and named after a woman who grew tomatoes and left them on porches without knocking. I said that is a good name. He said I think so too. We stood there for a few more minutes. I looked at the soil. It was March, too early to plant in Colorado Springs. The last frost date is mid-May, sometimes later, but the soil could be turned. The raised bed could be rebuilt. The hose could be replaced. The hook on the fence post could be sanded and a new pair of gloves could be placed there. Not my mother's gloves, but someone's gloves. Because a garden does not care whose hands do the work, as long as the work gets done. I did not tell Donovan any of this. I did not need to. He was looking at the same dirt and thinking the same thing because we came from the same woman, and that woman taught us both that you plant deep and you do not give things away to men who take from women who cannot fight back. I got back in my car at 10:40. Donovan got back in his truck. He rolled down the window and said, "Thank you. Not for the land, not for the money." He said, "Thank you for not signing." I said, "You are welcome." Then I said, "Donovan." He said, "Yeah." I said, "Tell Kayla I will teach Catherine how to grow tomatoes." He nodded once. Then he drove north, and I drove north, and the land stayed where it was, 1.2 acres of Colorado dirt, waiting for someone to come back in May with a pair of gloves and a packet of Cherokee purple seeds, and the kind of patience that only grows in people who have learned that the ground beneath you matters more than the buildings on top of it. If you are listening to this and you have family who erased you, I need you to hear one thing. The silence is not the punishment. The silence is the space where you build the thing they did not think you could build. And when they come back, and they always come back, you do not have to forgive them and you do not have to destroy them. You just have to know what you are worth. Read the spreadsheet, hire the attorney, sit in the chair, and do not sign anything in a room where someone else chose the pen. My name is Sloan Beckett. I am 34 years old. I am a pediatric dentist in Denver, Colorado. I own a clinic with 4 operatories and a fish tank and a sticker drawer and an associate named Priya who stayed, and a coordinator named Grace who brings me water in cups with cartoon sharks. I have $270,000 and a lease in my name and a right of first refusal and a piece of land in Colorado Springs where my mother grew tomatoes. And next May, I am going to plant some.